2012 model F250. I'm replacing the transmission on it. I wanted to give you guys a heads up on what's involved in removing it. This one was a 4x4, so we had to remove the transfer case. In order to remove the transfer case, you have to loosen the 6 bolts on the drive shaft that goes to the front differential, which is this one here. It has 6 bolts in the front, 6 bolts in the back. We took it loose from the transfer case right here. We unplugged the servo motor for the 4x4. We removed the drive shaft that goes to the back. It has 4 bolts on it. We went ahead and removed the catalytic converter bolts at the top, 2 15mm nuts. On the passenger side, 2 15mm nuts. On the transmission, you have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bolts. Let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 bolts, and 3 on the starter. This one had a broken off bolt on the starter. You have 4 nuts on the torque converter. On the driver's side, you have a 10mm bolt that holds the cooler lines. You have 2 10mm bolts that hold the shifter cable. On the back of the transmission, you have the bolts that hold the transfer case in place. As you notice, this one broke off, it's really bent. These are made out of aluminum. Overall, bad idea to have aluminum bolts, but anyways, a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 bolts. Actually, 9 bolts. Let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This here is a guide pin that basically lines up the transfer case in its place. On this side, you have the connector for the transmission. There were a couple of plastic clips that hold the harness in place. There was a 15mm bolt right here holding a bracket. The purpose of the bracket is it holds the gas lines and the evap lines. So basically 1 bolt, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. The size of the bolts. This is the bolt. This is the size of the bolts that hold the transmission. 13mm head. Transfer case bolts look like this. Inverted torques. On the torque converter, 21mm on the crankshaft to spin it. And then you have the access hole up here. Let me get a clear view of that. There's the access hole. 15mm on those bolts. This is the main connector for the transmission. You spin it and it pops out. I unplugged the oxygen sensors. I actually had to remove the oxygen sensor downstream on the passenger side for clearance. The mount had to be removed. This one's a little bit finicky. It actually came off with exhaust. The bolts are kind of hard to access. It's got 4 bolts that hold on to the back of the transfer case underneath. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. There's 2 10mm bolts on these heat shields and 4 large bolts on this part right here, the transmission cross member. The drive shaft slides out of the it slides out of the transfer case. It has a plate at the bottom, the transmission does, with two 13mm bolts. Not too bad. These two bolts at the top are kind of a pain. There's a bracket on this bolt right here that holds the transmission cooler lines. I believe there's another bracket up here for the fuel lines. This bracket. And then this is the other bracket that goes on the side on that bolt. I loosened the exhaust right after the catalytics, after the Y pipe. And then it came down. All right, I'm gonna be going back together with it now. Like and subscribe.